This will give us some details very soon of what the policy position is going to be on World Athletics for transgender women in female competition. There are talks and confirmation that this may have, and certainly the committee has been, the Brotherhood Council has been meeting in the last couple of days to try and agree this. It will affect not just transgender athletes, but also those classified as DSD, in other words, those who have differences of sexual development. The most high-profile example of that is Caster Semenya, who is the double Olympic 800 metres champion from South Africa. Now, the proposals would affect the amount of blood testosterone from the current maximum being reduced, and also below the level of 2 years. There has to stay below that level, not just for 1 year as it is at the moment, but for 2 years. So we are going to get to that news conference. Let's have a listen in.
Compliance to be monitored by the AIU, that is the Athletics Integrity Unit, at RUSAF's cost. The Council adopted that resolution, and therefore the task force work has come to an end.
Thank you. Rune, have you finished?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Oh, Rune, thank you. Sorry, I thought for a moment your screen had frozen. Rune, look, thank you for that. I'm sure there may be some questions that will come your way towards the end of the press conference. But let me just digress for a moment, because I'd just like to take this opportunity. I know I speak on behalf of all my council colleagues, and particularly those members of the task force, for the Herculean work that you and the team have done over the last 7 years. It's been exemplary, it's been painstaking, and I know at times it's been painful. This work was absolutely essential. It followed a process, and I like to think that those athletes that are going to be competing, I hope in future years in Russia, do so with the confidence of the rest of the sport. We still have some way to go. I think it is worth pointing out that alongside this reinstatement, there is a list of 35 special conditions to be applied for a period of 3 years. With a review at the end of that period to determine whether or not it is necessary to maintain those conditions as they are, or with variations for a further period. The Council then approved the recommendation to continue to exclude Russian and Belarusian athletes and officials from all our World Athletics Series events, World Championships, our Continental Tour meetings and other international competitions, and that is for the foreseeable future because of the invasion and the ongoing war in Ukraine. The full details of exclusion are included in the press release that will be issued at the end of this press conference. Both federations have 24 hours to respond to the Council's decision for Council again to consider. The Council has also approved the establishment of a working group to advise and recommend to the Council the conditions that would need to be met for the restrictions on athletes and officials from RUSAF and the Belarus Athletics Member Federation participating in World Athletics Series events to be lifted. This will be set up in the next few weeks. Let me now move on to the DSD and transgender regulations. The World Athletics Council has today taken the decisive action to protect the female category in our sport, and to do so by restricting the participation of transgender and DSD athletes. The decision was taken in consultation with a number of stakeholders, including 40 member federations, our coaches, our athletes, and through the Athletes Commission, as well as a range of other community groups, including trans groups, UN experts, the International Olympic Committee, and para-athletics. Let me, if I may, start with the transgender athletes. The majority of those consulted stated that transgender athletes should not be competing in the female category. Many believe there is insufficient evidence that trans women do not retain advantage over biological women, and more evidence than any physical advantages have been ameliorated before they are willing to consider an option for inclusion into the female category. Unlike DSD athletes, there are no transgender athletes competing in international competition in athletics, and no observations therefore exist from the front line, in our case, the field of play, across the different disciplines that are specific to our sport, i.e. endurance running, sprints, throws, jumps, and road events. Where the science is insufficient to justify maintaining testosterone suppression for transgender athletes, the Council agreed it must be guided by our overarching principle, which is to protect the female category. We cannot, in all conscience, leave our transgender regulations as they were at 5 nanomoles per litre for at least 1 year, when we were unsure about the impact of doing so across all our disciplines. So we need to know more, and we need to know more now. The Council has agreed to exclude male to female transgender athletes who have been through male puberty from female world ranking competitions from March the 31st this year. However, in order to do further research into our transgender eligibility guidelines, we will be establishing a working group whose remit will be to consult specifically with transgender athletes to seek views on competing in athletics, to review and maybe commission additional research where there is currently limited research, and to put forward recommendations to Council. The working group will include an independent chair, up to 3 Council members, 2 athletes from the Athletes Commission, a transgender athlete from athletics, 3 representatives of our member federations, and representatives of the World Athletics Health and Science Department. Let me, if I may, now turn to our DSD eligibility. The World's Athletics Council today decided to reduce the testosterone threshold for DSD athletes to 2.5 nanomoles per litre across all our events. We have DSD athletes competing in the unrestricted events in our sport, and we have 15 years of data, observations, and information directly from our own sport and, of course, our DSD athletes. As far as our medical manager is aware, there is no relevant athlete, by that I mean DSD athlete, in jumping or throwing events. Among the 13 athletes the medical manager has been in contact with and that we mentioned in our consultation paper, all have declined testosterone suppression or a complete medical assessment. Because of this, they have not been eligible to compete in the restricted events since 2019. Of those athletes still competing in the unrestricted events, around half are competing in running events over the mile, and the other half are competing in distances below 400 meters. We want to give the DSD athletes who are already competing in our sport, i.e. in the unrestricted events, all those outside of 400 to 1 mile, the opportunity to resume competition. But our scientific advice is that 6 months is the minimum period necessary to ensure their naturally high testosterone levels are no longer giving them an advantage over biological women. These interim provisions are only for athletes who are currently competing in non-restricted events, throwing, jumping, running below 400 meters or beyond the mile. The interim provisions do not apply to the previously restricted events. The 6-month duration chosen for the interim provision is a compromise to provide and allow the relevant athletes who previously competed in unrestricted events an opportunity to compete in compliance with our DSD regulations that were approved today. The 6-month period is in line with the required suppression for the current DSD regulations, and according to the available science, it is enough to bring hemoglobin levels, a key determinant of performance, from natural male levels to normal female levels. It is unlikely to be sufficient to reduce enough performance advantage in the power strength-based disciplines. Therefore, we believe that the interim provisions are likely to level the playing field in running events beyond the mile, where 55% of our identified relevant athletes compete. It is likely to still be insufficient to reduce the unfair advantage the relevant athlete experiences in sprinting events, where 45% of the identified relevant athletes are currently competing. DSD athletes who have been competing in the unrestricted events can apply to benefit from a reduced 6-month period to maintain testosterone levels under 2.5 nanomoles per litre, provided they apply and suppress their testosterone level to 2.5 nanomoles per litre before 1 July of this year, 2023. So none of these athletes will be eligible to compete in the World Athletics Championships in Budapest in August. They will be eligible to compete in other events after that 6-month period, including the Paris Olympic Games next year, if and only if they maintain their testosterone at the required level.